I was taking a stage degree at the University of Victoria, and I got to do a workshop with a Chinese opera singer. And if you're not familiar with Chinese opera, it's where Jackie Chan got all of his training. So he doesn't show it, but he can sing, but it's also the dance, the acrobatics, and things like that. And I was working with a woman, didn't speak very good English, but she was leading us through some Chinese opera stuff. And I put on a character, and I put on this voice, and she looked at me and said, "Oh, you should get into voice performing." So when it came to animation performing, when I got back from university, actually a guy, alumni will know this, a guy named Steve Olson, he was teaching a class to a friend of mine and suggested to him that he audition at this studio. And so we both went in because he knew I was a performer, and I got the gig and he didn't. And that was in 2001, maybe, and I've been performing steadily ever since. The rule is, or the joke, the cosmic joke is, if you can do anything else in your life other than an artistic career, go do it. Because it's full of frustration and challenge and honestly, sometimes not a lot of reward at the end other than kind of feeling self-fulfilled. I love doing it, I always have. And as a performance milieu, as something, because lots of people perform on stage, in film, dance, whatever. Performing in front of a microphone has just turned out to be what I do particularly well. I've tried to balance a career artistically between film and stage, even educating. But more and more, I seem to get paid more and more to do this. So in a way, kind of things reward you for doing what you do well. And that's kind of why I keep doing it. It's funny, only since I started doing more directing of animation did I've started making the connection more between film and the kind of work we do in animation voiceover. My background was stage, and the medium is, communicating a story 100 feet away to someone, right? In film and animation especially, there are moments in both where you're talking to someone very far away, but most of it's quite intimate. And for a stage performer, it's very difficult to do that because, a stage whisper, "What are we doing?" So it's those kinds of things that you don't, to bring it back and to make it more filmic, more natural, smaller. That's, by directing and having to give direction in that respect, I've actually started to connect it more to film. And I think it's improved me being on film, and it's definitely improved my directing, thinking of it that way. More than anything, and again, to connect it to film, it's short bursts of performance, right? Short cuts, you film a scene, you film a moment. Same thing with recording, it's there forever. And when you find it, when you get it just right, it's there, and you get to keep it forever. And that creativity and that joy you get when you are creative and when you tell a story and you get that reaction, right? Especially when you weren't looking for it in the first place. A laugh, an interpretation, something, yeah, that's it. That's why you do it. And you form that connection, right? You create a human connection by directing someone or by performing it that hopefully the audience will relate to. But usually, if it gives you joy, it's going to give the audience joy too. And that's the best part. Oh, there's a couple of things. Especially with animation, animating characters depends on the animation, but a lot of times they're dealt with in terms of stereotypes or archetypes, if you want to be more positive about it. So every character's got a few things. Are they a fighter? Are they a lover? Are they a wimp? Are they and there's, especially in Japanese animation, there are even more archetypes that you have to be aware of. So those can give you clues on how you should be performing. Physical cues. How you stand as a performer, your posture, your breath, where in your head are you doing a head voice, or is it down here, or is it a hero chest voice? So those are the kind of technical elements that you have to be aware of. A lot of actors will say their character's name and a phrase that will really get them, that's very definitive of that character, of that type of person, right? One of my favorite voice performers is a guy named Peter Cullen. Peter Cullen is the voice of Optimus Prime. He's also Canadian. He was born in Montreal, and he was the graduate of the National Theatre School, one of the first classes. and he based Optimus Prime on his brother, who was a Marine in the U.S. Marines. So and he gets in there and he clicks a few things about the authority, about his brother, about this, and then he says the voice and he gets into it, and that's how he inhabits the character. So a lot of people, and almost everyone's got a different process, but that's mine in particular. I think about where the voice is, say the name, and usually I try to remind myself about what they want. And in animation, usually the motivations aren't particularly complex, right? This character is a helper, this character is a fighter, this character is a whatever, and that helps. Well, I'm old enough to have been a Saturday morning cartoons kid. You know, Looney Tunes, Disney were some of my influences. I don't, and of course the Saturday morning cartoon guys, right? So only later did I figure out they were just trying to sell me toys, but in the meantime, I loved watching them. So those guys, not a whole lot of in the realm of Japanese animation, believe it or not. I grew up on a little bit of Ultron and a little bit of some other stuff like that. It was something I grew up with, not something I really paid a lot of attention to in my older years, but got out of college and got back into it, and now I've learned to appreciate the art form a little bit more. Animation's come so far, right? Like the animated movies that are coming out just through DreamWorks and Pixar and stuff, it's really elevated it to a much more appreciated art form than it was when I was growing up. You know, you tell people you're an artist and they go, oh, wow, it must be nice to have this freedom and to do what you want, right? And without a question, that's true. Finding the work that you want to do and being able to do it consistently is always the challenge. Probably the biggest misconception is that we drive around in fancy cars and make a really good living at it. And people do make a really good living at it, but they're few and far between. And often in a city like Calgary, it's much more difficult to do. And I can guarantee you that you know, I supplement my income or I supplement my career by doing more than just directing and performing in animation. So it's very difficult to do that. So it can be a great supplement to your income, but in order to do it full time, you'd have to go to a place like New York, LA, maybe Toronto. So when people talk to me about it, it's, wow, is that your Audi over there? No, no. So that's the preconception. I guess the other one is nobody wants to know how the sausages get made. So once you get involved in the process of making it, you see the kind of work that goes into it. And I don't know if the mystery's kind of there. I don't know if you might look at it and go, well, that's it. Some of the people I work with can tell you that it's very demanding. The show I work on and I direct is on a constant schedule. And there's always a time in which we can work. I think we'd all love to work. I think we'd all love to work in a Pixar setting where they can record for months and months and months and get it just right. But for what we do, we have a work of recording and then we have to move on and we get the best we can in the time we can. And I know of some performers who are often disappointed where they go, oh, well, that's it. And I'm disappointed too, but we have to move on. And I think those might be the two biggest preconceptions about what people think voice performing is like. Well, as a performer, and especially when we're doing ADR, right, which is matching the voice, here's another preconception that that as a performer, I've had the scripts for months and I've been able to go through it. And as a stage performer, I would read the script over and over again and try to infer and make choices. But actually, sometimes we only see the script the day of. So as a performer, my job is to do what the director tells me with very little information. And you the experience of trust that a voice actor has to have with a director in this situation is pretty extreme because it's the first time the performer has seen the video, read the script, you've done your character homework and you warmed up, but it's really up to the director to be able to interpret and help you find the best read for the scene because they've done their research and they've read the script and they understand the context of what's going on. A lot more like a film director would rather than, say, a stage director. So there needs to be a lot of trust there, and as a result, as a director, I feel like my job is to be as prepared as possible and to know what I want and to be able to go there convincingly and with confidence so that the actor feels comfortable and lets them know I'm leading them in the right direction. And I probably feel that a bit more keenly because I was a performer, that I knew what I wanted out of a director and I knew what I was frustrated with when I didn't feel like I was getting that, or if I felt like the director was giving me BS. So I feel like that's my responsibility, and I believe a director a director shouldn't do all the work. A good director should just kind of nudge here and there. And I appreciate that when the performers I work with bring a lot to the performance, and then I just have to tweak it rather than writing the entire script for them. Okay, you need to be this loud, you need to end here, you need to do that. So as a performer, I appreciate that, and as a director as well. In my little being like a mid-sized fish in a very small pond, most of my challenges are simply, as a performer, is getting the work. A lot of times as an actor, I don't care if it's film or stage or voice, if you were to define yourself by what you do the most, you'd consider yourself to be an auditioner, because that's what you do the most. Getting the parts, that's like the icing on the cake. So even someone like me who's been at it a while, my job is to do the best audition I can and hopefully get cast. I would say another challenge I have now is that my voice, as you get older, like I can still adopt a fairly young voice, but it's a little less authentic. I'm getting older. I don't quite have that energy of youth, or I'm just transitioning into a place where I play different kinds of characters. Usually they're the dads or the mentor figures to the young leads, that kind of thing. Occasionally the bad guy, that kind of thing. So there was a time in my career where I played the young hero, and now I'm kind of transitioning out of it. So as a performer, those are some challenges. Usually the leads get more lines, they get paid more, or they're in the studio more often, and you get more practice, which is always what you want. As a director, my challenges are always to provide the best direction I can and the most support and the most, and to create a good environment for which the artist to perform. It's a very small scenario in ADR especially, because there's the actor, there's the director, and then there's the engineer. And between the three of us, we have to create a performance that is technically sound, that is convincing, and that makes everybody look good. But in the room, the engineer has responsibility technically, and I always defer to the engineer, but otherwise, I really feel like it's on my shoulders to get the best out of the actor. And if the actor isn't giving it to me, it's my responsibility to say, you're not giving it to me, and to really push. So I think that's a fair look at what my job is and what my responsibilities are in both, or my challenges are, rather, in both those fields. Nationally and internationally, or in North America per se, it's getting harder and harder to produce animation. The margins on television as a whole, people are paying less for TV, advertisers are paying less for TV, so to record stuff on a long-term basis and then to buy the intellectual rights and to buy that intellectual property and then go and sell it, like say Funimation does, it's harder and harder to make your money back. So the company we work for do it by keeping costs low, and yet still we pay much better than a lot of other places, even in LA and New York, do for performers to do this kind of work. So on a big picture, it's actually become more challenging to make profit, to make it profitable to record animation, and at least distributing it through television. Now, there are online, and some of the shows that we direct are basically put for free up on YouTube, and it's more an investment in the marketing of the products that they sell. So the challenges over the years have just been keeping projects coming in and finding new ways to market and distribute them, so that we can keep doing what we really enjoy doing, which is voice performing. I have a few favorite characters. I remember there was a series years back called Zoids, Chaotic Century, and I think I'd only been doing it for a couple of years, and they cast me as the bad guy. But it was the typical thing where you come in at the end of an episode and you get to say, "Oh, we'll get them next time, Gadget," and then do that for several episodes. And then one day, I was late for my session, which I'm almost never late. And I came in, I'm like, all right, what are we doing? And I had no idea of the context of the character. And he's like, great, you're going to destroy the world. What? So I had this 4-episode arc of where I got to be the big bad guy at the very end and got into a giant dinosaur and blew up half the planet, and it was amazing. And it was exactly the kind of thing I wished I could have done when I was 11. You know what I mean? There have been lots of fun zany characters, especially in some of the more Japanese ones where their humor is so far off from what I've ever seen before, right? And they're particularly zany and high energy. Those have been really nice. And I don't know, I got to do the lead in a series called The Flame of Recca, and that was 52 episodes, and that was a major lead. It was an interesting point. I'm not sure I would do it again the same way I did do it, but I was really, really, really grateful for the role, and it was really gratifying, and it was one of those kind of older school anime, so a little bit more blood and a little bit more violence and stuff, so I really enjoyed that. My advice for people just trying to break in is take some acting classes. Get comfortable with your voice. You know, technology is now at a point where you can listen to yourself. You know, you don't have to spend $8,000 to get a decent recording rig anymore. You've got a computer, you've got a Blue Yeti microphone, and you can do voices on your computer and listen to it back. Be skilled with your voice. Do tongue twisters. Learn how to breathe. Learn how to scream if you want to do Japanese anime. And most of all, if you want to do this kind of work, there are sacrifices involved. You can't have a 9-to-5 job. You can use this to complement another career or several other careers, but you can't count on waltzing in and making a living at it. That kind of thing. And again, probably the best thing is just to have an open attitude and be ready to jump in with both feet. When we're auditioning, this gets into the question of how to do a good audition. And what I like to say is when you go into an audition, no one's in there looking for you to fail. When we're auditioning for someone, we need someone to fill that role. So we're actually wanting you to succeed. So you can get very nervous in an audition. So we're there to try to make you look good, and we want you to succeed. So what we're looking for is things like confidence. We're looking for you to have made some choices, right? Here's how I would do this, and this gets to the whole idea of acting, right? Not just having a nice voice, but making choices. If you're going to play a crazy character, what's your crazy character? What's your crazy character? And that's going to be different from anyone else's crazy character. And your best crazy character, the best version of that you do, is going to get you closer to getting the job or getting the role. So in the end, we're looking for an authentic read. I've worked with people who are under the impression that it's just got to be about the crazy voices, or the really sound, deep. I just have to sound like a radio announcer. But if there's nothing behind it, if there's no intent, if there's no conviction behind it, then it's just a nice sounding voice, and you might as well be doing radio on 660, right? Just reading the news, right? This is acting. So we are looking for perspective, we're looking for an opinion, and we're looking for choices. So make strong choices. And that's a good rule for acting in general. So that's the kind of thing we're looking for when you come in and read for a role. So much of what we do actually is just about using your regular voice, amped up a little bit. So people become surprised, and there's a comfort in putting on a voice, right? It's separate from who you are, right? I'm just going to do this voice, and it's not really me. But a lot of the times, 90% of what we do is your authentic voice, right? Acting, just being you. So the amount of acting involved is actually quite close to who you are as a person. So, but there is an art to putting it in your voice, right? And people think that when you do voice acting, you're just standing there and moving your mouth. But really good voice actors use their entire bodies. The microphone just happens to be there. It's like one of those puppets that you use, the ones that you hold at the back of their head and make them dance around. A good voice actor looks like that. This will look good on film. Are doing this, but they're staying on microphone, and they're bringing as much energy and life to the performance as possible. So It is just like acting. I wouldn't say you necessarily have to go and think about your dead dog in order to cry, but you just want to bring a little of yourself, and or as much of yourself as you can in order to make a convincing performance. The opposite of that also rings true. Sometimes we don't want Shatner-esque acting. Sometimes it's just, hey, can you pass me the salt? It's not, hey, can you pass me the salt? No, it's dude, you're asking him for the salt. Oh, okay. And that's all that's needed. So to perform authentically and comfortably in your own voice, and to be able to go there in your own voice is something that it sounds simple, but actually it's probably one of the toughest things that we do in the studio, and one of the biggest challenges I have with especially emerging voice performers. As someone who was an emerging voice performer, I remember, and on YouTube is a series called G Gundam, and it was my very first series and my very first character. And unlike some stage performers that can completely forget about their first couple of roles on stage, that's on video forever. And I can go back and watch what I was like at 21, the first time I ever played a character, and I'm terrible. I'm absolutely terrible. And I was nervous, and my palms were sweaty, just like Eminem, and my body was completely stiff, and I was frightened, and I kept having to do the takes over and over again, and I was being very Canadian and apologizing. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Now flash forward 20 years later, and now there's people in the booth who are scared and holding their breaths, and they're frightened, and they're apologizing. And so from my perspective, what I try to do is create a positive environment, and an environment to fail. When you get into the real world, we're not looking for, did I make you happy? Well, yeah, but I want you to come up with a strong choice. And even if that strong choice isn't the right one, it's still a strong choice. And if you try just as hard to give me what you gave me, even though it was wrong, I'll respect that and I can work with that. So my job for emerging professionals is to teach them technical tricks along the way, to explain clearly what I want and not confuse them. Maybe bring a bit of humor into it, you know. It's like, all right, let's try that one again. And if we have a good laugh and move on, it's great. We're always under time pressure in the kind of work that we do, but that doesn't mean that we should be rushed and not take the time to create. And also to be able to tell the performer when we've done a good job, because so often it's great, next cue. Sometimes it's good to take a moment and go, that was awesome, right? Because in voice acting, you can hear the difference between someone who is smiling and not smiling, right? Hey, you can hear that difference. So building and keeping somebody confident in the booth can only make their performance better. I've caught myself a few times rushing an actor along, and I could see them going, and I have to remind myself to go, all right, you know what? Let's take a break. You're doing great. We don't have to rush. Let's take it again. And usually after we do that, it's great.
Hey, Miranda. I think we're gonna have to talk. Well, my career seems to be going in a different direction because I'm entertaining children all over the world, and I really don't like your family, so I'm gonna have to kick you to the curb. Sorry.
We could do something like, how about Dr. Claw? Like,
It's not you, it's me.
Or we could do something like, how about Lilo? Was it Lilo or Stitch? It's the high-pitched one.
Stitch is the little animal thing.
Stitch is the one. It could be, what about,
So, I went to the STD clinic and the news isn't very good. Sorry.
How would Shin do it?
break up. Shin's never had a girlfriend.